The dude's wearing dog tags.
Please. The Harbingers. It may be too late.
Get down.
Who are they?
Doomsday cult.
Called the Fifth Son.
How do I know you're not just some tinfoil hat psycho?
This thing look like it's made out of tinfoil?
So...
So we are talking Armstrong, which is also known as Iron Arm. This is a kind of superhero science fiction movie directed by Kerry, Carlock and Nicholas Lund-Ulrich. So the story here actually focuses on two EMTs rather than the actual superhero stuff themselves. Very clever. So basically we have these two EMTs, one of which has just started her first shift on the graveyard shift. The other one is kind of like a salty old grumpy veteran. And on their kind of a routine, like there's a massive explosion in the neighbourhood, and they basically, on their way there, they bump into this guy who's injured, and he's got this weird kind of prosthetic type arm, and it turns out he's this kind of superhero type dude known as Armstrong, and there is a kind of a doomsday cult who are set to destroy the world, basically, and it's only up to these unlikely thrown together kind of group of people. Can they defeat the bad guys, even if they can get on with each other? So let's talk about Armstrong. This movie does something very clever, I feel, and that is, although it is a science fiction superhero film, it's not told from the perspective of Armstrong, who is this kind of superhero character. It is told from the perspective of Lauren, who is this new EMT. And what's really fantastic about this film is her portrayal, along with her portrayal of her partner, are so down-to-earth and realistic characters that it really grounds this movie in a sense of kind of like dramatic realism that is absolutely fantastic, I feel, especially when you're dealing with a low-budget movie. And then what it also does is it kind of allows you to follow those characters while the kind of the more kind of outlandish stuff almost happens in the background. When we are introduced to the kind of the Armstrong character himself, you know, he's kind of in and out, but he's never really the focus of the story. And it allows the filmmakers to really stretch the budget, basically, by not having the kind of the action be too kind of over the top, because you're seeing it from someone who's kind of like hiding for the most part, or kind of like in the periphery, and it just makes the budget work to deliver you a quality movie. Now, you may get people critique, oh, you know, the action was on this other character, but if the action was on Armstrong, I feel we would have a different type of movie, and the budget wouldn't be able to support the movie in the way that it does, and wouldn't be as strong, quite frankly. So I thought it was expertly handled, and the two actors that play the two MTs, I thought absolutely great chemistry, a real sense of kind of realism, very, very good. When we get to the science fiction stuff itself, I've got to say, you know, like I said, it's a lower budget film. They do a decent enough job here of kind of making the CGI helicopters and the kind of Armstrong's prosthetic still look reasonably good for a kind of like a VOD style release. I thought it's an okay job. And the guy who plays Armstrong, we don't really kind of get to know much about him, to be honest with you. And it kind of, in one way it works because he has this kind of air of mystery. You don't really know him, and he's kind of like this, this guy who shows up out of nowhere, and, you know, he's all very kind of mysterious and all that. But at the same time, he does feel a little bit underbaked at the same time. Do I have some issues with this movie? That will come in the form of bad guys. The bad guys, they're kind of, their foot soldiers are called the Harbingers. And they're basically a kind of, I guess, stormtroopers, for lack of a better word. But they look kind of cool. They look like SWAT guys, basically. But the dialogue, they say, is ridiculous. I mean, it's straight from a cartoon, which is really weird when you juxtapose it to the very realistic portrayal of these kind of EMTs and the kind of their very realistic dialogue. And you have this utter cheese coming out of the kind of the bad guy's mouth. And again, those guys that, you know, yeah, they're a doomsday cult who want to destroy the world. It feels very, very cartoonish compared to the more serious and kind of grounded tone set by our central protagonists. And then you have Armstrong, who's kind of straddling in between the two of them. So on one hand, I feel it works in that regard because you're seeing these clash of the worlds, basically, and these two, the fantastic and the mundane kind of colliding to kind of have this kind of beautiful mishmash of ideas here. But the second time, on the second hand, it's like oil and water. It doesn't mix in certain degrees. I also think the actual explanation about what's happened with the bad guys and their kind of plan, again, it seems a little forced, it seems a little rush, and it's clearly setting up a sequel, which I felt would have been, I would have liked them to have maybe concentrated on this film a little bit more, rather than kind of seemingly in a bit of a too much of a rush to set up a sequel. Like, we never see like a central figure of this kind of the bad guy. It's more just your foot soldiers and stuff like that. And obviously when you see the end, obviously you'll realise where it's kind of going with the sequel. The only other minor gripe I would say is this girl, Lauren, is an EMT, and there's a couple of instances that are very primed for her to use her skills and kind of show what she can do, rather than kind of the path that it took. And it doesn't do them on either time, which I found a bit of a missed opportunity. That would have been, especially when we have this kind of big story that she's saying about, EMTs and basically why she kind of joined up. It seems a missed opportunity not to almost pay that off in a positive way. But the path they chose was a little different. Overall, though, this was, for a low budget movie, they did everything right. I think they did everything right that they could, maybe with the exception of a lot of things I've said, obviously. But it's a really strong film, very kind of like commanding performances, very kind of like, at least our protagonists are very well-rounded characters, our two EMTs. Yes, I think maybe Armstrong could have been a little bit more fleshed out, and the bad guys as well could have been not so cartoony. But overall, this is a very strong film for me. And if you're a superhero fan and you like the kind of like the smaller ones, like the kick-asses and that sort of thing, not so much the Marvel films and stuff, you might want to check it out because it's definitely worth your time. I'll give this movie a solid 7 out of 10. It's definitely worth your time if you're a science fiction fan. I mean, it's not too superhero. It's like I said, it's more of a science fiction film rather than a superhero film, but I guess you'd probably class it as a superhero film. 7 out of 10 though, very, very good. Very interested in to see where they would go next. I hope if they do go into more films, it kind of keeps some of this kind of like grittiness that it's maybe built up with this film. So 11 out of 10. Have you seen it? What do you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.